We're back with the balance breakdown this week. I'm joined as by the fantabulous beast himself, Harry Powell, and we're going to discuss the latest UFC installment. Took place in the Apex last Saturday night. A nice little tight 10-card fight card, Harry, which is quite refreshing. It'll make things a little bit easier for us today as well. Bobby Green, Grant Dawson in the main event, Joe Pyfer, Abdul Razak Al Hassan in the co-main event, and a bunch of other fights that we're going to get stuck into over the course of the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. I'm glad you're all here. I'm glad you enjoy us. If you like what you hear over the last couple of weeks, I always forget to say this at the start. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell a friend. If you're listening or on the Patreon account, leave us an old comment if you agree or if you disagree with anything that we're saying. We're always glad to open up a little bit of extra conversation around the podcast, and do appreciate the support from over there as well. There's a new chat group that is also started on the Patreon too, so we're trying to get that up and running as well. You can also leave a comment there too. Harry, good sir, how are you? I'm going to send it over to you to do as we always do for the quick rundown of the card. Like I said, a 10-fight card before we get tucked into the main event. That was Bobby Green and Grant Dawson. How did you find it?
Not great, like. I'll start with the positives. Positives were Bobby Green looked fantastic. 10-fight card is sublime. Just sublime in terms of there is like, okay, it still took 7 hours, but like, if you have a 10-fight card and you get that out in 4 hours, right? 4 hours, 5 hours, that's just wonderful. Like, absolutely wonderful. You come in short and snappy, get the fights rolling. Like, if we had a 10-fight card with Cage Warriors pacing for the UFC, it's a dream. We're off to the races, boys. Now, I will say, I liked that there was less fights. Obviously, some of them fell out and whatever, these things happen. I still think the sweet spot is 12 fights, but you know, we are where we are. I'll just run through. Bobby Green, fantastic. We'll get into that. Joe Pyfer did exactly what he needed to do. You can tell that that's a man that is certainly still progressing and certainly still growing, but did what he needed to do. Joaquin Buckley and Alex Morono went literally exactly how we thought it was going to, so fair play to us. Drew Dober, I thought he was measured, looked good, did what he needed to do. I didn't catch the Bill Algeo Alexander Hernandez fight. We'll talk about that after. War Carolina, again, just did exactly what she needed to. Nate Maness, I thought looked brilliant. And I wrote about him for my spotlight, so we'll talk about that in more detail. Vanessa Demopoulos, Kanako Murata was a pretty awful fight all around. I think neither of them won that fight, but we'll talk about that. Arichi Lang and Johnny Munoz Jr. was just some awful fight IQ from Johnny Munoz Jr., and he should have won that fight. And then JJ Aldrich did JJ Aldrich thing, and that's a massive positive. If I can watch JJ Aldrich jab a lady for 15 minutes, I will happily lap that up. But there was just what we've seen on other fight cards, and at least this is my read of it. What we've seen on other fight cards is that there has been performances that have, or there have been bouts, I should say, that have given us something, some form of storyline, some form of divisional repercussion, some form of prospect breakout, just some form of conversation points to be made. And I don't think it's necessarily us being lazy media members or whatever, but I just felt that a lot of these fights, they didn't give us the performances that maybe we thought we were going to get, or they didn't give us the ramifications that we thought we were going to get. And so even the main event, like the main event finishing in 30 seconds is strange, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Maybe we'll just dive straight into the main event and I'll let you go. But it was just diving in, and it was just 30 seconds is so long.
It was kind of like over before it even began. And look, we're talking about what the main event gave us, and after the main event, it gave us Bobby Green getting a win and getting into the rankings in the lightweight division, which, you know, obviously that's at the cost of Grant Dawson. But it was nice. It was a nice moment for Bobby Green, a guy who's been a veteran of the game, a guy that's been in the UFC for quite so many years, and a guy who's been putting the work in the last couple of years for exactly an opportunity like this, Harry. And he took it with flying colors, really going in there. And I bet, you know, he was even surprised himself of the outcome. Look, there's 30 seconds of this to analyze. It's pretty easy. Grant Dawson came out looking stiff and looking a little bit nervous, if I do say so myself, on the feet. And it was that stiffness and that maybe apparent nervousness that ended up getting him caught and getting him on the receiving end of the hook of Bobby Green. Well, it was actually straight left hand, but a really, really well-timed shot by Bobby Green wasn't taken that well by Grant Dawson. And ultimately, he went down. Bobby Green followed up with some ground and pound, and the fight was over. 33 seconds of round one. Bobby Green, your winner by KO/TKO. Look, I kind of gave a quick rundown of the fight, Harry. Any takeaways from the fight and from the result itself?
So my initial read, when I watched Dawson walk to the cage and when I watched him pace around the cage before the main event, there was something that he said in the pre-fight build-up that just kept ringing in my brain. And he said, look, if I'm going to be a world champion, I need to take these events in my stride. I need to take these main events in my stride. And as he walked in, there was just something that told me that he wasn't taking it in his stride. And instead, the idea, because let's just play this out a little, right? Grant Dawson, he made another statement, which I thought was very, very poignant, both to how he sees himself divisionally, but also to how he views the game, right? He said, if I go out and beat Bobby Green, right? If I go out and get a number 9, number 8, number 7 next to my name, I'm not fighting the winner of Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor. He's like, I'm not, even if Chandler's 4 and I'm 3 or I'm 5, I'm not fighting Michael Chandler. If Conor McGregor is 7 and I'm 6, I'm not fighting Conor McGregor. And so what that tells me, at least, is one, Grant Dawson understands that Conor McGregor fight, or even, frankly, a Michael Chandler fight, which is certainly more in his reach should he get to certain divisional positions. But he understands that he's not a star, right? And that gives you a reflection of what he thinks of himself. And when you're a fighter, that's dangerous. It's dangerous to be logical, right?
Such a fantastic analogy, Harry. Like, I mean, yeah, I could not agree more with that. It's like, you know, all right, fair enough if you don't think you're a star, but the power is in your hands to make yourself a star. And like, we had questions over how far Grant Dawson would go in the lightweight division on the preview show to this fight last week. And you know what? Those kind of reservations, they kind of shone true on Saturday night, because that was a winnable fight for Grant Dawson. And that was maybe his moment to cement his status as the top 10 and give himself the opportunity to go in there against some of the elite. And he failed big time, really. He failed. It looked like, I said, I'm glad you agreed with me, you know, it didn't look himself on the walkout, but even more so, I saw the start of this fight and I was like, I seen him, like, you know, when you see a guy kind of strutting towards someone and it's like pacing small steps instead of like just this flowy movement, it looked stiff. It looked tense. And, you know, Bobby Green didn't let him settle into the fight at all. And after 30 seconds, that first shot was basically one of the first exchanges. I was like looking at the fight and I was thinking, Grant Dawson is not going to be able to maintain this on the feet if he's going to continue to kind of look a little bit stiffer, a little bit wooden out there, because Bobby Green is the polar opposite, Harry. He's in there, he's comfortable, he's flowy, almost damn near broke his neck on the entry into the octagon as well. I was lucky the fight wasn't called off before it started. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No, what did he do?
He does. Do you know the way you do this dive into the cage, and it's kind of like, say, a swanton bomb from Matt Hardy, where he dives and then turns at the last minute and rolls. The guy nearly fucking landed on his neck going in. I was getting the sweats before the fight even started. It was almost like a Johnny Walker worm moment, but he got through it, got the job done, and you know, yeah, it just kind of feeds into the thought process around Grant Dawson and whether he is you know, a top 10 level talent in the lightweight division, and he failed a big test on Saturday night. And now it's all about the comeback. How can he respond from that? But, you know, we had our reservations, Harry, before the fight. I would still have those reservations. I don't think it's all done for Grant Dawson. I think there is opportunities for him to come back and be a prominent kind of fixture in the rankings in the lightweight division. But I really struggle to see a push for the title at this stage of his career. I know, and that's a harsh assessment, but, you know, my gut feeling tells me maybe he has 1 or 2 good top 10 wins in him, but you need probably 3 top 10 wins in a row to probably get yourself to top 5 competition. And, you know, at the age of his career, what is he now? Yeah, he's 29. He has a little bit of time, you know, so all is not lost. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on the future of Grant Dawson.
I don't think this was a skills issue. And like, I think it was mental. Like, to me, where I will completely agree with you is for you to be a lightweight champion, for you to be a lightweight contender, for you to be a lightweight top 5, there has to be absolutely no doubt, not one single iota of doubt that you're the best fighter in the world. Like, even to this day, if you said to Dustin Poirier, can you beat Oliveira? Can you beat Makhachev? Can you beat insert top? Yes is the answer. Without a shadow of a doubt, he'll tell you that he could beat them. He'll tell you it's a tough fight. He'll tell you that they're talented and skilled and well-prepared and all that. But absolutely, he will tell you that on his day, he can beat those fighters. Without a shadow of a doubt, he'll tell you he's a star. He'll tell you he is the UFC champion without a belt wrapped around him. Grant Dawson, as of right now, does not give me the same impression. And that, I think, is where, as we've said previously, the delusion pays dividends for fighters. So for Grant Dawson, I think in this one, firstly, you don't see Grant Dawson skirting the edge of the cage like that. At no point did I see him even begin to think about level changing. Now, okay, this is 30 seconds in, whatever it is. But it felt to me as though this was a brain was not engaged to fight mode. Brain was engaged in a I'm walking out as a main event fighter, and the A side of a main event fighter, we should say. And that's what got to him. I don't think it's necessarily, obviously it pertains to a skill issue. What returns is he gets knocked out, right? Fine. Okay, no problem. These things happen in MMA. But it's like, why did he get knocked out? Was it purely a skills issue? I don't think it was. Because the way Green caught him, he caught him lined square up, but his head was turned the opposite way. Like, that's not something we've seen.
Exactly. And one thing that worried me was the reaction to that as well. It seemed like Grant Dawson didn't know how to react to shots like that. And, you know, how someone might ask, how do you learn how to react to shots like that? Well, that's what you spar for, to be honest, is to get yourself as comfortable as possible to take those shots, because, you know, it's not nice, and it's never nice getting hit in the face. I know you've been hit in the face square. I've been hit in the face square, but it's a strange sensation eventually where you actually get used to it, where you can start walking through shots, or you know how to react when you get hurt, rather than, you know, what Grant Dawson did after getting hit was turtle up. You know, he probably should have dropped to his back and tried to allow Bobby Green into his guard, and maybe he could have survived a little bit longer there. But, you know, that comes with experience, that comes with lots of sparring, and it's a strange situation to put yourself in, where you have to put yourself into the line of fire to find comfort in that chaos. So, you know, Grant Dawson didn't do it. Look, like I said, all is not lost for Grant Dawson, but all is gained for Bobby Green, who catapults right up into the rankings, who kind of cements my maybe next fight for Paddy Pimblett. I know I said the winner might be touted for Paddy Pimblett if he gets through Tony Ferguson, and there's a big if that's standing over that, possibly. But yeah, are we looking at a guy, you know, they're going to be trying to slow roll Paddy Pimblett into the lightweight rankings, and I think Bobby Green is the perfect match for him. What did you think of Bobby Green? I mean, it was the same Bobby Green as we'd seen time and time again, Harry. There wasn't really much to discuss in terms of development or leveling up. Bobby Green, you know, he was in there. He's experienced that main event before, and he just looked really comfortable and delivered on the night.
Look, I just think with Bobby Green, and this is not a criticism at all, but you said it yourself. He's in there and he's flowy. And I think he was shocked himself that the finish came so early. Like, he knew going in that Grant Dawson's a good fighter, right? He knows going in, Grant Dawson can wrestle, he can strike. He will have seen, or at least his coaches will have seen, the Demiris Magulov fight. And so they know the caliber of fighter they're going in against. And so when Bobby Green lands that left hand, now, don't get me wrong, he's forced Grant Dawson's hips to be square. He has forced the position to be available. He's forced the angle to be available. But even he, I think, when he threw that left hand, didn't expect Dawson to fold the way he did. And so for Bobby Green, like, we've seen this in Bobby Green fights, he'll land that left hand over and over and just warm himself up into those shots. Whereas Dawson just collapses, right? Fine, takes the shot, buckles, and here we are. Bobby Green gets a win in 30 seconds. That's grand. But I agree entirely that we didn't even get a chance to see whether Bobby Green has added any tools to his game. I don't think we will have seen that. I think at this point in his career, what is he, almost 50 fights deep? It's going to be difficult to add vast swathing changes to your game.
Mm-hmm.
But I could not agree more with you on the Paddy Pimblett call. I think that this actually, for the UFC, is the absolute... We always say this, right? We always say that the UFC will win every single time. And if Grant Dawson beats Bobby Green, well, then the reason they set the main event up works for them. They have now got another fresh guy that they can push up into the upper echelons of the lightweight division. They have a new name, new guy to market, etc., etc. Fine, no problem. If Bobby Green wins, well, now you can shoehorn Bobby Green into fight with fighter X. And if you are looking for an opponent for Paddy Pimblett, that's your guy. Like,
that's it. And that's the way I think of it. I like to try and look at these matchups from a business perspective for the UFC as well. And that, look at number one, Bobby Green, I felt he did this. Look at, he's been a guy who stepped in at short notice. He's done the thing for the UFC. So fair play to the UFC. They gave him that reward. But I always think of it that way. And that's why I came out. It might have sounded crazy before the fight, but here we are. It seems a lot more realistic now for Bobby Green. And look at, I'm assuming, I don't know whether you have another name or what you would like to see next for Bobby Green. Is it on the same scale as maybe what I was thinking? But what are we thinking about all of that, Harry?
I wrote down Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. If Paddy Pimblett gets through Tony Ferguson, you've got your veteran test, and now you've got the chance to enter into the rankings in the lightweight division. In a fight that's more winnable than a lot more in the top of the rankings in the lightweight division as well. And if he doesn't do it, he's lost to a ranked fighter, and he'll be able to rebuild and go again after that. So all things, all things are lining towards a Paddy Pimblett Bobby Green fight. Bobby Green said that he wants to fight again before the end of the year. I say, cool the jets, Bobby. Let's see how this next fight plays out, and let's see if you can get yourself a big fight against Paddy, maybe a little bit later on next year as well. We shall move on. Let's talk about Joe Pyfer versus Abdul Razak Alhassan, Harry. And look at you kind of labeled this at the start of the podcast. It was a test passed against an old wily veteran for Joe Pyfer. What were your thoughts on his performance?
I thought he did exactly what he needed to do, right? Like, I do wonder at this point in Abdul Razak Alhassan's career as to what level of veteran he actually is. You know, like, we're going to talk about Alex Morono coming up. Now, that is a wily veteran. That's a gentleman that's going to make you work and earn for things. And if you get a win over Alex Morono, at least right now in Alex Morono's career, you know that you're getting something that is worth something. I'm not sure with Abdul Alhassan how much this win really tells us about Joe Pyfer. Now, what it tells us is his ability to grapple. It was pretty fantastic. The immediate ability to drop on a double, run Alhassan across the cage and take him down, especially the level of athlete that Alhassan is, that's very impressive. That's very, very, very impressive. So hats off to Joe Pyfer for those things. His willingness also to grapple, his willingness to adhere to a game plan, fantastic. There are certainly moments in that fight where he gets clipped unnecessarily. There are certainly moments in that fight when he will go back and his coaching team will say, we need to tighten up defenses here, here, and here. Fine, no problem. But the finish itself it's just a textbook head and arm triangle. Like, gets the takedown, immediately looks for that far cross shoulder post so he can tuck his shoulder behind. I took his head behind the shoulder, gets it, passes through to mount, and we're done. Like, we're done. Abdul Alhassan, it looks like he's punching the ribs. I think just as he's going to sleep, that's his attempt to tap, but he hasn't quite got the energy to open his palm up. But all in all, I was impressed. Like, I was impressed. Alhassan is no joke. He's certainly got power in those hands. He's certainly a freak athlete. And so it ticks those boxes, right? It tells us that Joe Pyfer has the technical ability to maneuver his way through very, very, very good athletes. It shows us that he has the chin to take a shot, because he certainly took one in that fight. And he has the ability to finish fights against guys that, you know, are harder to finish than your average guy at the lower levels of the middleweight division. But again, I don't know whether the UFC are ready to push Joe Pyfer into like an actual test right now. If they are, I have some names. If they're not, then, you know, we can discuss other names. But I feel like the most important thing for Joe Pyfer right now is skill acquisition and winning. You know, this train that the UFC have him on, sorry, I'll be very quick. The train this UFC have him on, it's very similar. And this is rude, right? This is rude, but it's very similar to the Paddy Pimblett train in that if he loses, the train slows down dramatically. And so for Joe Pyfer, the really important thing is that he keeps winning.
It is. And like, I guess, look, he's been outspoken. He's been talking about getting better pay, and we know what happens when we get better pay, Harry. It means it comes stiffer opposition that you're going to have to face off. At 27, there's no mad rush here with Joe Pyfer. You know, I think a steady build, allow him to grow. We're not going to throw him to the wolves. He seems like a fairly marketable fella. He speaks well. He single-handedly brought a halt to the flag ban inside of the UFC. I mean, he's ticking off all the boxes here. And you said that you have names. What names have you got for me?
So it depends what we want to do with him, is the honest answer, right? If we want to do the real test, then Fluffy Hernandez is still waiting for a fight. And so to me, that's the guy. You want to do grappling things? Fluffy Hernandez will happily do the grappling things with you. If you want to be a tough, hard-nosed, raw bastard, to quote Will Fleury, then we can do that too. We'll stand and we'll bang, and I'm happy to do that, says Fluffy Hernandez. Fine. If you want to give Joe Pyfer a fight that I think his athleticism will carry him through in a big way, and somebody that's still a name, but is certainly declining in his career, is Brad Tavares. So you want to chuck him in with Brad Tavares? Can he head an arm triangle Brad Tavares? Probably. So
yeah, I think they're very, very, very good options. And it's like, you know, those are going to give you a test that I want to see for Joe Pyfer next, because Alhassan kind of bothered him a little bit with those calf kicks. So that's a little bit of a worry. So, you know, maybe there's a few openings on the feet there that we'll need to work on. But, you know, what he needs to be put in, and I say he as in Joe Pyfer, he needs to be put in with a guy that might be able to stuff a couple of takedowns and force Pyfer into kind of having a stand-up exchange throughout 3 rounds. But look, it's interesting. There's a couple of different avenues could go down, and the world is Joe Pyfer's oyster at the minute. He's looking like he's going to get a new fresh contract, and it'll be interesting to see what they have next for him. I will move on to the next fight, and that's Alex Morono versus Joaquin Buckley. And for me, Harry, this fight, I would say I was most impressed out of anyone on Saturday night. It would be Joaquin Buckley, because look at, obviously you had Nate Maness as the severe spotlight too. I like Joaquin Buckley because we're finally seeing a level of maturity in him as a person and as a fighter as well. And I think that kind of was on showcase when he went in there against Alex Morono, and he made it look relatively easy, Harry. And it's not easy to go in there and make it look easy when you're taking on a guy like Alex Morono, whose game is fuck. And And you know, Joaquin Buckley ticked off all the boxes, and you mentioned, you know, his athletic ability shone through on Saturday night, and that's what we talked about on the preview. And I'm curious to hear what your assessment of his performance was.
So I think that the thing that impressed me the most is, you've already used the word, it's maturity, right? What Joaquin Buckley didn't do for large portions of the fight was he didn't just wade in with massive hooks and get clipped. There were a couple of times when he did that, but he recognized those moments. There was one specifically in the second round. He waded in and Morono faded away and landed a lovely lead uppercut. Now, the problem, I think, in this specific fight for Joaquin Buckley was he realized when he took a couple of shots from Morono that they weren't going to hurt him. And he also realized that he was banging away at Morono's body and he was banging away up top and he was landing. And it didn't matter to him if he got hit 3 times because he knew that the shots were nowhere near as damaging as his were. And he believed, I think, that if he continued to stick to the game plan set for him, he would get Morono out of there. And he nearly did in that 3rd round. I think, though, my criticism, and I'm going to, now of his potential divisional position, we have to start criticizing him for these sorts of mistakes. There was still not enough jabbing, and there was still a lot of hooking, and there was still a lot of hooking when the shot selection was absolutely a jab or a straight right hand. And so against better fighters, and eventually we'll get to names, but against better fighters, you are going to get found out in those situations. It does not matter how good of an athlete Joaquin Buckley is. It does not matter how hard it is. Let's just say, if we get crazy, this is not the fight I want, but let's say we put Ian Garry in there. If you're swinging like that, you're asleep inside a minute and a half.
100%.
There's no way you get away with that against better, really technical strikers that also have power. There's just no way you get away with it. And so if I'm looking in Joaquin Buckley's corner and in his team, I'm investing heavily in a jab because the bodywork was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
It was great. I really, really liked how he used it intelligently to open up Alex Morono and sap the energy of Morono. So as he started to slow, the hooking became so much easier because Morono was standing still more. Fine, no problem. But we absolutely must add a jab.
I found that Joaquin Buckley was chasing a little bit too much on the feet as well. And you can't do that. I mean, you can fall into the chasing trap a little bit when you're striking, but it's much more better get that footwork down as well, where you can trap your opponents. And you know what? When you trap somebody, you don't have to fucking chase them. You can just get them to where you want to be and lead them to the shots that you want to land. And, you know, that takes a lot of work on the feet, on pad work and on sparring and spatial awareness as well. And, you know, those are things that Joaquin Buckley will have to do. But all in all, I was very impressed at the development that he's making. Obviously, there is some improvements and he's going to have to make them as well as he moves up the rankings. But similar enough to kind of like Joe Pyfer, it was a good veteran test for Joaquin Buckley, and he passed it with flying colors. So, I mean, I think it was a more difficult veteran test than Joe Pyfer had to. I think like Al Hassan is more of a low scale kind of veteran, all right. But you know, I mean, all things are leading in the right direction for Joaquin Buckley, and it'll be interesting to see what is next. And I'm curious to hear what you think should be next for Joaquin Buckley.
Okay, so what do I think should be next? RDA.
Interesting. Yeah, we're going to do that. Yeah.
What I think will happen is they're going to push him through the Neil Magny gauntlet. Neil Magny is going to have to fight another one of the crazies, right? I think that, and this to me is a similar, like Neil Magny is still a very, very solid veteran, make no mistake about it. But I wonder whether we are facing a very similar situation with Alex Morono, where Magny doesn't have the power to dissuade Buckley. The reason I like the RDA fight is because RDA will turn the pressure up. He can absolutely go 5 rounds. And if it's me, Buckley is in the next fight night main event with RDA. because marketable guy, looks fantastic. Okay, might not talk the best, but you've got the Impa Kasanganai knockout, and that's all you need. Like, and I think the RDA can absolutely take a shot. He can absolutely land a shot, and he has the cardio to bully Joaquin Buckley if he needs to. So
yeah, and that's something that Alex Morono didn't really do enough of the other night, was mix it up. He was happy to just stand and try to trade with a guy who was just quicker, was more explosive, and more athletic. And obviously it didn't work out for Alex Morono. 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. The judges got it spot on there, if I do say so myself. But what RDA will offer, and I love that matchup too, will offer as a guy who's going to try and take Joaquin Buckley down, or at least not try and take him down, make him work. You know, make him work. It just doesn't happen enough. It frustrates the life out of me when I see that. It's like, you know, we'll talk about Alex Hernandez and Bill Algeo in just a moment, which was similar kind of frustrations in that fight for me as well. But before we talk about that one, Harry, we'll talk about Drew Dober and Ricky Glenn, and Drew Dober's incapability of being in boring fights and always bringing the heat. It was a further fantastic performance for him, and it sets up another possible big fight as well. I mean, you know, we were talking maybe of Paddy Pimblett coming in here, but I don't think there's a chance in hell they're going to stick Paddy Pimblett in with Drew Dober, especially after what he did to Ricky Glenn. It was just a brilliant performance again by Drew Dober, and he has these in his repertoire, really, Harry, and a dangerous man to take on any night of the week.
Yeah, he really is. Like, you're damn right. There's fucking no way Paddy Pimblett is getting a contract with Drew Dober's name on it. You're fucking joking. I think for me, the thing that was impressive about Drew Dober was in this one, he managed to meld maturity with madness. And what I mean by that is he realized very, very early that he had to get inside the very long, very lanky, gangly frame of Ricky Glenn. And how did he do it? Well, he did it cleverly. He picked his spots. He went low kick. He went low kick. As Ricky Glenn started to pull his legs in, he went to the body, beat up the body a little bit, made him question, oh, shit, we're here for 3 rounds. And, you know, I'm going to be suffering here, and I need to check my footwork and my head movement and all this. And then he comes in with the fucking venom left hand. And now we're off to the races. Like, there was one left hand and Glenn no-sold it, but it was 100% hurt. And Drew Dober knew it too. And Jesus Christ, Drew Dober, when he has you hurt, is just a problem. Just a
he's one of the best at like finishing guys. Like, we see a couple of people in there who hurt guys and just fail to do the right thing to kind of put them away. But Drew Dober, every single time, man, his killer instinct is ridiculously good, and I love watching him fight. He's up there. He's 34. He's doing the damn thing now. Look at one loss to Matt Frevola in his last 5 fights. I think we need to give him another crack at the rankings. I think he deserves it. Look, at a slip up against Frevola. It happens. What would you like to see for Drew Dober next?
Well, I think Drew Dober has entered the portion of his career where he actually has given up on the idea of championships and this and that and the next thing. I think he's trying to take the Michael Chandler approach, which is become a legend by taking as many exciting fights as possible. And he's kind of said that himself when he said, I turned down fights that I think will be boring. I'm only picking fights that will be exciting.
And so sometimes sorry for interrupting, but when you're talking about a guy like Drew Dober, it must be hard to kind of balance or comprehend, you know, being honest with yourself and realizing, you know, I'm not going to be a champion here. But on the other end of the stick, it can kind of be a freedom in that thought as well, where it's like, fuck it, I'm just going to go out and give it my all here and be in an exciting fights. And, you know, I that's a very good analogy there too. Please continue.
So the name in that vein is Dan Hooker.
I love it. I love it. You're on fire with it. We're not always on it, but you're on the pulse with these matchmaking. I love that fight. My goodness, that would be that would be insane. Absolutely insane. It's crazy that they haven't fought already, because the two of them have been around for such a long time. There's obviously history there. as well with Drew Dober, who lost to Brad Riddell, a training partner of Dan Hooker as well. So that would be a great one. Dan Hooker's in the rankings. I get what I want, you get what you want. Everybody is a winner, and the fans would be a winner if that fight was ever to take place as well. I like that. I like that. For Ricky Glenn, I mean, yeah, another disappointing loss for him, and he's going to have to settle for a big kind of fight next against maybe another unranked up and comer. That's 2 losses in a row. He's under pressure now. His back is against the wall, but look, not an easy feat to go out there and defeat Drew Dober, and you know, he found out the hard way on Saturday night. Moving on to Bill Algeo versus Alexander Hernandez. I know that you didn't get the chance to watch this. I'll just give a quick rundown. This was a super. I thought Sean covered this very well on the big podcast this week, and just sharing a little bit of frustration about Alexander Hernandez. He looks fantastic at featherweight, it has to be said. Looks like he's really developed into that 145-pound weight. But what he did in this fight, Harry, was try to single shot Bill Algeo on the outside. And Bill Algeo's speciality is staying on the outside and throwing single shots. And it was like Paul Felder mentioned it in the first round, and I was thinking exactly the same thing before he mentioned it. It was like, we need to be 3 and 4 combinations, coming in with 3 and 4 combinations to kind of counteract the single shots of Bill Algeo, and he didn't do that. He wanted to remain on the outside, didn't insert himself into the pocket. Hurt Bill Algeo with a big shot in round 2, but then subsequently got hurt and dropped himself in the second round. Then took a kind of a thumb to the eye. It was a difficult one to see on the cameras, but it looked like the thumb was in, it wasn't sticking out, and it was a legit shot. Came back, and there was a little bit more about his performance as well, but really it just left you wanting a little bit more and expecting a little bit more from a guy like Alexander Hernandez, who, like Sean said, does have bundles of potential, but it's like we've seen the madness of him before inside the octagon, and it's like that madness wasn't there on Saturday night, and he could have done with it, where he just came in throwing a couple of big heavy hooks in the middle of the pocket to get Bill Algeo out of there, or at least, like, it was clear when we were watching the fight that Alex Hernandez had more power. He had the bigger of the power of Bill Algeo, even though Algeo dropped him, but he just wasn't throwing enough. And that was really the story of this fight. And like I said, Sean covered it quite well on the podcast, and there's not too much more that I can add to that. Only that it was a disappointing performance for Alexander Hernandez, a guy who was full of bags of confidence before. Remember, he came out and he was talking a big game ahead of that Cowboy Cerrone fight, and Cerrone had to humble him that time. And it's kind of ever since then, really, it's been up and down for Alex Hernandez. It seems like his confidence was absolutely crushed in that loss, and he's been just up and down. And over the course of his last 10 fights, there's more losses there than wins, Harry. And you know, we have to wonder what is next for a guy like Alexander Hernandez at 31 at featherweight. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I actually, you already said it. The Donald Cerrone fight changed Alexander Hernandez, and it changed him for the worst, because before then he had the confidence that his ability would take him wherever he wanted him to go, but it doesn't, you know. And from then it seems like he's struggled to define who he actually is. He's struggled to define what he wants to be as a fighter. You know, Bill Algeo is a fight that he should have been winning, you know. And here we are. We're now going to discuss the names for Bill Algeo to fight rather than for Alexander Hernandez, right?
Yeah, 30-27 across the board. It's a unanimous decision win from Bill Algeo. I'm not saying any of that to take away from Bill Algeo. He went in, he got the job done, he landed his shots, he fought his game plan. You know, we're talking about changing it up a little bit. It's like Alexander Hernandez himself didn't shoot for any takedowns. I know that he has struggled with his gas tank a little bit. Maybe the lack of wanting or the lack of output is maybe a kind of a back burner thought for him, that he doesn't want to drain his gas tank, especially down at 145. But, you know, he's had a couple of fights down there now, and, you know, I think the criticism is fair, but credit to Bill Algeo. He got a big win over a guy that's well known inside the UFC. And what would you like to see next for him?
Paul Hughes? The honest answer, and I'm not even joking, is Paul Hughes. Like
Yeah, it makes sense now, doesn't it?
It does. But if we're not going to do Paul Hughes for whatever reason, how about Charles Jourdain?
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic matchup. Fantastic. I like that. And I think they kind of counteract each other quite well, where Charles isn't afraid to throw volume. So I'll be very interested to see how Bill Algeo deals with that. Talking about a little bit of a down spiral in Alexander Hernandez's career, Harry, we can't say the same about Karolina Kowalkiewicz, because she's had quite the remarkable career recovery after picking up 5 losses in a row. She's bounced back and won her last 4 in a row, and it's been a sensational turnaround for the former Polish title contender.
I agree. She looked great. Like this was her.
It was a win. It was a winnable fight for her too. I got to see Diana Belbita at the Vancouver card, and she fought first night against a not too great of a fighter. I was looking at it, I'm not sure what the odds were ahead of this fight, but I was looking at it thinking that this is a fight, given what we've seen recently from Karolina, that she can win. And she went out and did it relatively easy as well, to be fair.
I agree, but she did it in her own way, right? Like it was vintage Karolina, where she was landing lots and lots and lots of volume, lots of straight shots. Her head movement was good. When she was in the clinch, she was offering knees and elbows and just dirty boxing in that clinch range. She was taking the fight down. She was being dominant there. And she also put herself in the line of danger, and it made it an exciting fight. And look, this is absolutely the Karolina Kowalkiewicz that we all fell in love with. This is absolutely the Karolina Kowalkiewicz that we want to see in the UFC. Now, I don't know whether I want to be pushing Karolina right now into a title shot. I am kind of happy just keeping her in and around this level where she sits at the edge of the rankings at that number 15, number 14, all the way to sort of 13, 12, maybe those kind of spots. I am very happy to keep her at. And then let's just see if she continues progressing and blowing women out of the water, then it's going to have to happen. The push is going to have to happen, but I certainly don't need to see it right now.
4 wins in a row, Harry, certainly puts you in the firing line to take on a ranked opponent next. And maybe a reintroduction for Karolina into the rankings and see what she can do there. But, at 37 now, she has had that title run in her. I would agree with you in thinking I'd struggle to see her make another push for the title in the strawweight division. But at the very least, what she deserves after this career resurgence is a crack at somebody in the rankings.
I do agree, but it's not the fight I've picked.
Okay.
The fight I've picked is Loma Lookboonmee.
Nice.
And the reason why I picked that fight is because it's another winnable fight, right? But it's another winnable fight where Loma will happily stand and trade. And if it hits the deck, Loma's adding some submissions to her game now, and she's progressing as a fighter. So it's absolutely a test to see, again, whether Karolina is where we think she is. And then, okay, if we make it 5 straight, then fine, let's talk about a Marina Rodriguez or one of the unmatched 125ers. We can have a look at some of the fights that haven't yet played out. Like, let's say, why don't we do the winner of Tabatha Ricci and Lupa Godinez? That's another option, right? But I would do that if Karolina wants to turn around quickly and Loma can turn around quickly, and we can do that, maybe the start of next year. Chuck that in, and then we'll wait and we'll see, and whatever happens. But I don't need to see Karolina pushed into anything crazy right now. I just don't.
Yeah, I can't argue at all with that sentiment either, Harry. It'll be interesting to see what the UFC do with her. Like, she is kind of in a position where she is a well-known name, and the UFC may use for that name to kind of build other people. And maybe that was the idea with Diana Belbita in this fight, but obviously that didn't work out. And Loma Lookboonmee is a great fight for me, and I would definitely be interested in seeing that fight. Next on the agenda, Harry, I'm going to send it straight over to you. Nate Maness was the Severe Spotlight this week. SevereMMA.com. Go over and check out that article. Just give us the quick lowdown on why you chose Nate Maness. Another fantastic performance and win by KO in the first round against Mateus Mendonca. And look, we've been talking up Nate Maness for quite some time now. When we originally seen him in the 135-pound division, and obviously since he's moved down to 125, has looked just as good as well. And you know, I know you're a big fan of him too.
Yeah, the reason I wrote about him is twofold. Firstly, because people just look over Nate Maness because he lost a couple of fights to good fighters. And in the 125-pound division or the 135-pound division, like, how often do we talk about it that you literally can't put a bad fight together in those divisions? And so for Nate Maness, I just thought it was important that he's coming up against another hungry, young prospect that the UFC are putting him in with, because maybe this guy has a future and it's Nate Maness' job to find out whether he does or not. And I was just really impressed with how the Mendonca's approach from the grappling positions was very, very, very non-MMA. It was very much sport grappling, Kanebasami, scissor takedowns, inversions for legs, these types of things, playing saddle positions, playing double outside Ashi positions. Like, this sort of stuff is stuff you just don't see in MMA. Yeah. And frankly, Nate Maness showed you why you don't see it in MMA. But in the same vein, Nate Maness could be thinking, as this is happening, he could be thinking, fucking hell, if this lad's got the confidence to try this in an MMA fight, he must be seriously fucking dangerous in these positions. And so for him to keep his cool, for him to navigate those positions as well as he did, for him to still be able to pass his defensive responsibilities with his responsibilities on the judges' scorecards, which is to prioritize damage, and he definitely prioritized damage, and then to find a way to utilize and neutralize your opponent's guard and basically knock him out inside his own guard, that's impressive to me. That's impressive. And I think we really, really need to look at fighters like Nate Maness and just take note of who he is. He's not going to win a title, right? He's not. He's not going to have a single ranked digit next to his name. But there is nothing. You could absolutely see Nate Maness rank 15, 14, 13. It just is entirely dependent in that division on how you rank, how you match fighters. It really, really is. If you give a fighter at 125 a string of matches that he's in a position to win more than others stylistically, you'll find him in the rankings because they're all so competitive with each other. I just think it's time we put a little bit more respect on Nate Maness' name.
100%. That 135, his last loss came against Umar Nurmagomedov. So
what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Next fight obviously didn't go his way against Tagir Ulanbekov. His first fight down at 130. Yeah, another tough one, but his first one down at 125. So there's that transitional period that you need to give him time to get settled into the weight. But I mean, he looks fairly settled into the weight on Saturday night, if I do say so myself. And I agree with you, man. I had got to see him obviously through interviewing Tony Gravely, and he fought Tony Gravely, who was a decent fighter too. And got the win there. But I thought, I was excited to see he's moved down to 125. And I do agree with you. While I don't kind of really see him pushing towards the title, there's definitely a shot at getting into the rankings for Nate Maness. And I do always enjoy seeing him fight and seeing him compete. But you didn't really enjoy the next fight, Harry. And that was the fight between Vanessa Demopoulos and Kanko Murata. You were not impressed by either one of these?
Horrific. Neither lady. So Demopoulos just didn't realize she was fighting a fighter the same size as her. She's used to, because she's quite small in her stature, right? She's used to fighting ladies that are taller. And so she has like a really kick heavy game because that's the range that she's used to fighting in. But Murata is just as small, and Demopoulos did absolutely nothing to change any of her style. She threw a ton of naked kicks, got took down by a gust of wind a multitude of times, and then Murata was just not able to do anything useful on top. There was barely any damage on top. The biggest thing that happened was a clash of heads caused a cut, and it was just bad. Like, it was really bad. Demopoulos, her takedown defense is just non-existent. And then, like I've just stated, Murata's pinning ability, her ability to land damage on top, her ability to negate submissions and watch submissions. Like, we're doing close guard armbars in 2023. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
What in the name of 1990s UFC action are we looking at here?
Right. Just not good. Not good quality at all. Not good.
Yep, say no more, fam. You don't need to. Any name for Demopoulos?
Invicta.
Hey, I love it. There you go. Send her over to Danny McCormick and let Danny sort her out.
Oh, that would be a savage fight.
Yeah. What about that for Danny? Let's say Danny gets the win, and let's send Danny into the UFC to take on someone like Vanessa Demopoulos. I'd love to see that. Let's get that done. Look, we're talking about not being impressed, and you were less than impressed about some of the things that Johnny Munoz Jr. did against Araklilang. He lost a unanimous decision to the Chinese fighter, and yeah, a couple of mistakes in there kind of threw this one away, Harry.
I mean, he took the first round, hurt Aoriqileng, took him down, had his back, had a fully locked in choke. And then Aoriqileng, fair play to him, he gutted the choke. He found his way out of it, no problem. But it's not a fight that Johnny Munoz Jr. should have been losing. It was entirely, he fell in love with the grappling. And again, we're looking at fucking close guard arm bars. We're looking at just grappling techniques that are so easy to defend at this level of MMA. Don't get me wrong. If you look at a Cage Warriors Academy card, you might well see a couple of close guard arm bars from some 0-0, 0-1, 1-0 amateurs. You might see it for sure. But we're talking about the UFC here. And don't get me wrong, Munoz Jr.'s grappling, for grappling purposes, looked great. But this isn't about grappling for grappling purposes. This is about damage and submission attempts. And we didn't have enough of them. And Aoriqileng's damage did far more immediate impact than anything that Johnny Munoz was looking for. But just the inability to notice that your game plan is going egregiously wrong and you're just getting beaten up and then changing it, just forget it. Just awful. Awful. Not good.
Do you care what's next for either one of these fighters?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I kind of got that tone. So we should.
Paul Hughes.
Huh?
Paul Hughes.
Paul Hughes. Yeah. It's that one. Is it that? Well, it's that 135. But let's have him fucking. Let's have him move up and take on Paul Hughes. But boom, I love it. Your girl JJ Aldridge isn't disappoint. Ireland's own JJ Aldridge took home the unanimous decision win, and she just went in and did what she does best. Harry, man, she's just. You can't not want JJ Aldridge to go in there and do well. She's never in a disappointing fight, always brings it, and is the perfect opponent for someone like Montella De La Rosa. If you're not on your game, you're going to lose, and that's exactly what happened. And I just think that JJ Aldridge is a better fighter than Montella De La Rosa, and would probably beat her 9 times out of 10 if they were to face off, to be honest. What did you think about that performance?
Completely agree. Like, you know what you're getting with JJ Aldridge. And I was actually chatting to Spencer about this offline, but the thing that upsets me the most is I just wish that JJ Aldridge had managed, because you remember Rose Namajunas used to wax lyrical about JJ Aldridge as a training partner when she was in her early 20s. And it's just such a shame that it's taken her this long to really start to figure it all out and put it all together, because I think that the time has gone for JJ Aldridge, both physically and sort of road miles in her career, to start to utilize all of the amazing attributes that she started to put together to then give her awards in terms of divisional rankings and title shots and these sorts of things. We're not seeing that from JJ Aldridge in this portion of her career. And that to me is a real crying shame, because she is turning herself technically into a very solid, fundamental, hard to beat, difficult to deal with fighter. And that's exactly what you need in this division. You need a woman like JJ Aldridge who, like you say, if Montella De La Rosa or any other fighter is not on their game, they get whacked. And that's what we saw.
Good douche. That took us brilliantly through that card. 10 fights on tap. Let's take a look at the performance bonuses. I always kind of want to mention these at the end and keep forgetting. 50 went to Bobby Green, 50 went to Joe Pyfer, another 50 went to Drew Dober, and Nate Maness versus Mateus Mendonca picked up the fight of the night. No, there's no fight of the night, so it was just 4 bonuses: Maness, Dober, Pyfer, and Green. I can't disagree with all that. Can you, Harry?
Absolutely not. Fair play to all of them. Great performances.
At BJJ_Harry Powell is where you'll find that man. At O'Neill MMA. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you for the preview show in just a couple of days. Until then, take care.